Sir, you're under arrest for suspicious behavior while black. Master Sergeant Marcus Washington, 45 years old and dressed in civilian clothes, sits in the third row of Riverside Elementary School's auditorium, watching his 8-year-old daughter Zoe perform in the annual spring play. 3 police officers storm into the room, their heavy boots echoing against the polished floor as children's voices falter mid-song. The officers drag Marcus out in handcuffs while parents gasp and children scream in confusion. His daughter Zoe cries, "Daddy," as they shove him into a patrol car, her small voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. As the vehicle pulls away, Marcus whispers something to his wedding ring before they fully secure the restraints. The phone hidden in his jacket pocket begins to vibrate with an incoming call that reads Pentagon Classified. Officer Derek Hawkins, a 12-year veteran with a documented history of anger management issues, receives the dispatch call at 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. Black male acting suspicious near elementary school premises, the voice crackles through his radio. No weapon mentioned, no actual crime committed, just a complaint from a concerned parent who felt uncomfortable seeing Marcus arrive early to secure good seats for his daughter's performance. Hawkins's partner, Officer Rodriguez, questions the urgency of the response, pointing out that school events typically involve parents and family members. But Hawkins speeds toward Riverside Elementary anyway, his jaw clenched with the familiar anticipation of confrontation that has defined too many of his interactions with the community. When they arrive at the school, Hawkins immediately focuses on Marcus, whose calm demeanor and military bearing strike him as suspicious rather than admirable. Marcus sits quietly, checking his watch and adjusting his tie, preparing to record his daughter's special moment on his phone. To Hawkins, this composed behavior reads as arrogance, and Marcus's upright posture and confident presence trigger something deep and ugly in the officer's psyche. When Marcus politely asks why he's being questioned, addressing the officers with the same respectful tone he'd use with a superior officer, Hawkins hears defiance instead of courtesy. The fact that Marcus doesn't cower or show immediate deference to police authority infuriates Hawkins in ways he doesn't fully understand. The situation escalates quickly when Marcus mentions that he's active military, hoping this information might de-escalate the confrontation and allow him to return to his daughter's performance. Hawkins scoffs openly, his voice dripping with disbelief and contempt. "Yeah, right. And I'm the Pope," he sneers, drawing uncomfortable looks from other parents who recognize Marcus as Zoe's father and a regular presence at school events. Several parents try to intervene, explaining that Marcus belongs there and has every right to watch his daughter perform. But Hawkins doubles down to save face rather than admit his mistake. The power dynamic becomes clear as Hawkins enjoys the control he wields, especially over someone who carries himself with natural authority and dignity. As they escort Marcus to the patrol car, the veteran maintains his composure despite the humiliation of being arrested in front of his daughter and her classmates. Hawkins intentionally tightens the handcuffs beyond necessity, ignoring Marcus's polite request to contact his commanding officer for verification of his military status. During the drive to Riverside Police Station, Marcus's calm voice cuts through the tension like a blade. "Officer Hawkins," he says quietly, "you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career." Hawkins laughs, unaware that Marcus has just activated a GPS tracker embedded in his wedding ring, a piece of military-grade equipment that will soon change everything. At Riverside Police Station, Death Sergeant Collins begins processing Marcus according to standard protocol, asking routine questions that should immediately alert any competent officer to the gravity of their situation. Marcus provides his occupation as military consultant and lists his workplace address as the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Responses that should trigger immediate verification procedures according to federal law enforcement guidelines. His military identification card, when finally examined properly, shows a security clearance level that requires special handling and immediate notification of military authorities upon any civilian law enforcement contact. Hawkins dismisses these revelations as elaborate lies, convinced that Marcus is a disturbed individual playing soldier and manipulating the system with stolen credentials. When Sergeant Collins suggests making a verification call to the Pentagon, Hawkins overrules him with the authority of the arresting officer, claiming that Marcus is clearly mentally unstable and probably dangerous. The arrogance in Hawkins's voice becomes more pronounced as he insists that Marcus is running some kind of con game, refusing to acknowledge the possibility that he might have made a catastrophic error in judgment. Marcus remains eerily calm throughout the booking process, his bearing shifting subtly from civilian casualness to military formality as the situation deteriorates. Other officers in the station begin noticing something different about their prisoner: the way he holds himself, the precision of his responses, and the quiet authority in his voice that suggests extensive leadership experience. When Marcus requests his legally guaranteed phone call, he demonstrates specific knowledge of military detention protocols that only someone with real experience would possess, quoting regulation numbers and citing federal statutes with casual familiarity. Young Officer Martinez whispers to Sergeant Collins that perhaps they should take Marcus's claims more seriously, noting that his knowledge of military procedures seems too detailed and accurate to be fabricated. Collins examines Marcus's military identification more carefully this time, discovering that while the card appears legitimate, the rank and security clearance levels seem impossibly high for someone their age and experience would typically encounter. The growing unease in the station becomes palpable, as more officers realize they may be dealing with someone far more important than Hawkins assumed. Marcus finally speaks with quiet authority that makes everyone within earshot unconsciously straighten their posture. "I've been patient with this process," he says, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command, "but in 25 minutes you're going to wish you'd made that verification call." Outside the station, a black sedan with government license plates parks across the street, its occupants making phone calls and taking notes. The wheels of federal authority have begun turning, and Marcus knows that his ordeal will soon transform into his opponent's nightmare. Feeling increasingly threatened by Marcus's unshakable composure and growing authority, Hawkins decides to break what he perceives as dangerous confidence in a black man who refuses to show proper deference to police power. He forces Marcus into an empty interrogation room, making him stand for over an hour while denying basic requests for water or the opportunity to sit down. Hawkins employs psychological pressure tactics learned from outdated training manuals, attempting to establish dominance through petty cruelties and deliberate humiliation designed to crush Marcus's spirit and force him into submission. The humiliation tactics escalate as Hawkins forces Marcus to recite what he calls his fake military service record, mocking each achievement and decoration with increasing viciousness. He brings in other officers to witness what he describes as Marcus's delusions of grandeur, encouraging them to laugh at his ridiculous claims about Pentagon connections and classified security clearances. Hawkins threatens to charge Marcus with the federal crime of impersonating a military officer, a serious felony that could result in years in prison and complete destruction of his actual military career. The breaking point attempt comes when Hawkins crosses every line of professional conduct and human decency by showing Marcus cell phone footage of his daughter crying at the school after witnessing her father's arrest. With sadistic pleasure, Hawkins suggests that Child Protective Services might need to investigate Marcus's fitness as a parent, implying that his mental instability and criminal behavior make him a danger to his own child. He describes in graphic detail how the system might separate Marcus from Zoe permanently, painting pictures of foster care and legal battles designed to shatter the veteran's resolve. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus's carefully maintained mask begins to slip, but not in the way Hawkins expects or hopes. Instead of breaking down into tears or angry outbursts, Marcus's expression shifts to something far more dangerous: controlled fury, backed by decades of military training in hostile interrogations and psychological warfare. His body language becomes perfectly still, his breathing measured and deep, as his mind shifts into combat mode despite the civilian setting. Hawkins mistakes this transformation for surrender, but Marcus is actually entering a state of strategic calculation that will ultimately destroy his tormentor. Rather than breaking under pressure, Marcus begins methodically documenting everything happening in the interrogation room. Names, badge numbers, exact quotes, precise timestamps. His memory operates with photographic precision, a skill developed through years of intelligence work that his captors don't realize he possesses. He starts asking specific questions about department policies, internal affairs procedures, and recording equipment protocols, demonstrating legal knowledge that makes the other officers increasingly uncomfortable. When he mentions specific case law by number and cites federal precedents regarding police misconduct, the atmosphere in the room changes dramatically. Finally granted his constitutionally guaranteed phone call, Marcus doesn't contact a lawyer or family member as expected. Instead, he dials a number that makes Desk Sergeant Collins raise his eyebrows in alarm. "This is Master Sergeant Washington, identification number classified," Marcus says in a voice that carries absolute authority. "Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. Current location Riverside Police Department. Timeline execute now." After hanging up, Marcus looks directly at the security camera recording everything and delivers a statement that will haunt his captors forever. "Gentlemen," he says with deadly calm, "you have exactly 22 minutes to make this situation right, or it becomes a federal incident with international implications." In the holding cell where they've finally placed him, Marcus doesn't pace frantically or bang on the bars like a typical prisoner facing an uncertain future. Instead, he sits in perfect military posture with his eyes closed, running through complex calculations and strategic assessments with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes mission planning. This isn't his first time dealing with corrupt authority figures or hostile interrogations, but it's the first time such treatment has directly affected his daughter, and that personal element transforms his approach from defensive to comprehensively offensive. Marcus's internal monologue reveals the strategic mind that has made him invaluable to Pentagon operations for over 2 decades. He's been underestimated his entire career, learning to turn that disadvantage into his greatest weapon by allowing opponents to reveal their weaknesses, while he gathers intelligence and plans their downfall. Every act of humiliation is being catalogued with clinical precision, every procedural violation documented for the systematic dismantling that will follow. The arrest has provided him with perfect real-world documentation of institutional bias and police misconduct that will serve his official mission in ways he never anticipated. The phone call he made wasn't simply to a commanding officer or military attorney, but rather activated a comprehensive network of military intelligence personnel, federal legal advocates, congressional contacts, and civil rights organizations that Marcus has cultivated over 20 years of distinguished service. Each person in this network has their own professional and personal reasons to ensure that military personnel and their families aren't subjected to abuse by civilian authorities. The Protocol 7 designation triggers immediate federal intervention procedures designed to protect classified personnel from compromise or harm. Through Marcus's thoughts, fragments of his true background begin emerging like pieces of a complex puzzle. Special forces training in psychological operations, multiple classified missions requiring deep cover work, and his current role involving oversight of military-civilian cooperation protocols throughout the United States. This arrest isn't merely a personal affront or case of mistaken identity. It represents a direct violation of federal agreements governing the treatment of military personnel and a potential breach of national security protocols. Marcus begins implementing subtle psychological warfare tactics from his holding cell, demonstrating knowledge and capabilities that terrify the officers who assumed they were dealing with an ordinary civilian. When officers walk past his cell, he addresses them by their full names and badge numbers, recites details from their recent performance evaluations that he shouldn't have access to, and mentions their family members by name with casual familiarity. The implication that he possesses detailed intelligence on local law enforcement personnel creates an atmosphere of paranoia and fear throughout the station. As Collins frantically makes the verification calls that were denied earlier, the military identification check reveals that Marcus's security clearance level is classified above local law enforcement's authorization to confirm or deny. Each attempt to verify his credentials triggers additional federal notifications, creating a cascade of official inquiries that will soon overwhelm the small-town police station. Marcus maintains his strategic patience, counting down silently, not to his own freedom, but to the moment when his opponents realize they've walked directly into a trap of their own making. At exactly 18 minutes after his protocol activation call, Marcus stands and straightens his uniform shirt with military precision. "It's time," he announces to the security camera, and, outside the station, the rumble of heavy military vehicles begins approaching through the quiet streets of Riverside. Officer Rodriguez, Hawkins' increasingly uncomfortable partner, finds himself caught between loyalty to his colleague and growing awareness that their situation is spiraling completely out of control. The phone calls flooding into the station are becoming stranger and more ominous by the minute, military personnel from various branches requesting updates on Master Sergeant Washington's status and condition, federal agencies demanding immediate cooperation with ongoing investigations, and a congressional aide insisting on speaking directly with Chief Morrison about potential violations of federal law. Each conversation makes it clearer that they've arrested someone with connections far beyond anything Rodriguez has encountered in his 15 years of law enforcement. Police Chief Morrison, hastily called away from a family dinner, arrives at the station demanding immediate explanations for why federal agencies are suddenly interested in their small-town operations. His questions become increasingly pointed and angry as he reviews the arrest report and realizes that no actual crime was committed, no proper verification procedures were followed, and his department may be facing federal intervention for civil rights violations. Morrison's decades of experience tell him that situations like this can destroy careers, bankrupt municipalities, and result in federal oversight that strips local departments of their autonomy. Hawkins, feeling his control and authority slipping away, doubles down on his original position with increasingly desperate lies and fabrications. He files additional charges against Marcus, including disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and threatening police officers, creating a paper trail of false accusations designed to justify his actions retroactively. Each lie makes the situation exponentially worse, as federal databases immediately flag any charges filed against personnel with Marcus's security clearance level, triggering automatic reviews and oversight procedures. The web of federal oversight tightens around the department, as each attempt to verify Marcus's background reveals new layers of classification and importance that local law enforcement lacks the clearance to access. Rodriguez begins piecing together the truth that his partner refuses to acknowledge. The original suspicious behavior complaint came from a single racist parent who saw a black man lurking near the school when Marcus was actually arriving early to secure good seating for his daughter's performance. The fabricated threat that justified their response exists only in the prejudiced imagination of someone who couldn't accept a black father's presence at his child's school event. Chief Morrison takes a call that drains the color from his face and makes his hands shake visibly as he grips the phone. When he hangs up, his voice carries the weight of someone who realizes his department is facing an existential crisis. "Boys," he says quietly, "we need to release him immediately and hope we can contain the damage." Through the station windows, military vehicles are clearly visible, lining up outside like an occupying force. Their presence a stark reminder that local authority has limits when federal interests are involved. Chief Morrison realizes with growing horror that his department is facing a potential federal incident that could result in the complete destruction of everything he spent 30 years building in law enforcement. The phone calls aren't stopping or decreasing in intensity. Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, military legal advocates, and federal civil rights attorneys are all demanding immediate information about Marcus's arrest and treatment. Each conversation makes it clearer that they've stumbled into a situation with implications far beyond their small-town jurisdiction and capabilities. Word of the arrest spreads rapidly through social media networks and veteran advocacy groups, with the cell phone footage recorded by parents at the school performance going viral under hashtags demanding justice for the arrested sergeant. News vans from regional and national outlets are already en route to Riverside, transforming what began as a routine police matter into a potential national story about racial bias and military mistreatment. Morrison recognizes that his department is about to face the kind of scrutiny that destroys reputations and ends careers. The department's legal counsel explains their exposure in terms that make Morrison's blood run cold: false arrest, civil rights violations, potential federal charges if Marcus's security clearance involves matters of national security, and civil liability that could literally bankrupt the city of Riverside. The lawyer emphasizes that their situation becomes exponentially worse with each passing minute that Marcus remains in custody without proper justification or federal notification. Insurance companies are already being contacted about potential million-dollar settlements and federal oversight costs. In a final act of prideful desperation, Hawkins refuses Morrison's direct order to release Marcus immediately and issue a formal apology to prevent federal intervention. His racist ideology won't allow him to admit error or show deference to a black man, regardless of military rank or federal authority. Instead of following lawful orders from his superior, Hawkins storms out of the station, abandoning his partner and his sworn duties rather than face the possibility of being wrong about someone he judged based purely on skin color. Federal pressure intensifies when a call from Washington makes Morrison realize that Marcus isn't simply a military officer caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. The person on the other end of the line explains that Marcus is involved in classified programs affecting national security, and his arrest without proper federal notification protocols is being treated as a potential security breach, requiring immediate federal investigation. Morrison walks toward Marcus's cell personally, but before he can speak, Marcus looks up with calm authority and delivers a statement that changes everything. "Chief Morrison, you have exactly 5 minutes before this becomes an international incident with consequences beyond your imagination." Marcus stands as Chief Morrison approaches his holding cell, and the transformation in his bearing is immediately apparent to everyone present. He's no longer playing the role of victim or prisoner, but clearly revealing himself as a man accustomed to command authority at the highest levels of government and military operations. His voice carries the unmistakable tone of someone who has briefed generals, testified before Congress, and operated in situations where national security hangs in the balance. The other officers in the station find themselves unconsciously standing straighter and speaking more respectfully, responding to leadership presence that transcends their local hierarchy. Marcus explains with clinical precision that he's not simply any master sergeant caught in an unfortunate case of mistaken identity or racial profiling. He's a key component of a classified Pentagon program that reviews military-civilian cooperation protocols throughout the United States, specifically focusing on how military families are treated by local law enforcement agencies. His arrest while off-duty and in civilian clothes has provided perfect real-world documentation of the exact systemic failures his program was designed to identify and correct. The data collection aspect of his ordeal becomes clear, as Marcus reveals that every moment of his arrest and detention has been recorded through military-grade surveillance equipment concealed in his clothing and accessories, voice recordings capturing bias-laden language, GPS tracking showing excessive transport times and unnecessary detours, physiological monitoring documenting the deliberate stress tactics employed during interrogation, all of it creating a comprehensive case study in institutional prejudice and police misconduct that will be analyzed at the highest levels of government. Marcus offers Chief Morrison a path toward damage control that demonstrates both mercy and strategic thinking. He proposes a comprehensive resolution involving full departmental apology, immediate disciplinary action against Hawkins, mandatory bias training for all personnel, and cooperation with his ongoing research into police-military relations. In exchange, he's willing to forgo federal lawsuits, media exposure, and the kind of congressional investigation that could destroy the department and the city's budget for decades to come. Morrison recognizes that Marcus is offering him far more mercy than the situation warrants, but Hawkins' actions have escalated beyond the point where local control is possible. The military vehicles outside aren't merely for show or intimidation. They represent the tangible reality of federal authority superseding local law enforcement when military personnel are involved. Through the station windows, Marcus can see his daughter Zoe safely seated in the back of a military staff car with his wife Sarah, confirming that his family is protected and his honor will be restored regardless of how the local authorities choose to respond. Marcus checks his military-issue watch and delivers his final ultimatum to Morrison with the calm confidence of someone who holds all the tactical advantages. "Chief Morrison," he says quietly, "your window for a quiet, local resolution just closed, permanently." At that moment, the station doors open, and military officers in dress uniforms enter with the unmistakable authority of federal intervention, led by a full colonel whose presence transforms the entire dynamic from local law enforcement to national security matter. Colonel Janet Hayes enters Riverside Police Station, accompanied by 2 military police officers and a Pentagon legal advisor. Her presence immediately transforming the atmosphere from local law enforcement business to federal authority with national security implications. Her uniform displays ribbons indicating combat service, advanced education, and high-level security clearances, while her bearing demonstrates the kind of command presence that comes from years of making decisions affecting thousands of lives. The local officers instinctively recognize superior authority and find themselves deferring to her leadership despite the jurisdictional complexities. Marcus's true role emerges as Colonel Hayes explains that he leads a highly classified Pentagon program studying civilian-military relations, specifically documenting how military families are treated by local law enforcement agencies throughout the United States. His arrest and subsequent treatment have provided perfect real-world validation of research methodologies designed to identify and document systemic bias in police procedures. Every aspect of his ordeal has been carefully observed, recorded, and analyzed as part of an ongoing federal investigation into civil rights violations affecting military personnel. The strategic importance of Marcus's work becomes clear as Colonel Hayes reveals that his program was created following congressional testimony from dozens of military families who faced discrimination, harassment, and civil rights violations at the hands of local law enforcement. His research has been authorized at the highest levels of government, with funding and oversight from committees responsible for military family welfare and civilian-military cooperation. The arrest has inadvertently provided documented proof of the exact problems his program was designed to study and solve. Marcus's calm throughout the entire ordeal wasn't simply personal discipline or military training, but professional methodology applied to real-world data collection under extreme stress conditions. Every response was calculated to document the system's failures while maintaining legal and moral superiority, demonstrating that peaceful resistance and strategic thinking achieve better results than violence or emotional reactions. His ability to gather evidence while enduring humiliation represents exactly the kind of leadership military families need when facing civilian bias. Federal authority supersedes local law enforcement, as Colonel Hayes explains that interfering with Marcus's classified mission constitutes a federal offense with serious consequences for individuals and institutions involved. His security clearance requires immediate notification of any civilian law enforcement contact, and the delayed verification represents a complete breakdown in federal-local cooperation protocols that could have national security implications. The equipment he carries and the communications he maintains are classified above the level that local authorities are authorized to access or interrupt. Hawkins' absence from the confrontation becomes evidence of abandoning duty when faced with superior authority, adding dereliction of duty to his growing list of professional and legal violations. His pattern of excessive force complaints and documented bias incidents, previously buried in departmental politics and union protection, now faces federal scrutiny with career-ending and potentially criminal consequences. Colonel Hayes makes it clear that federal civil rights charges are being prepared regardless of local actions. Despite having grounds for comprehensive federal charges that could destroy careers and bankrupt the city, Marcus demonstrates the mercy and strategic thinking that have made him invaluable to Pentagon operations. His mission isn't to destroy local law enforcement, but to improve it through documentation, education, and systematic reform. This incident becomes a teaching moment rather than a purely punitive example, showing how individual transformation can create institutional change. The station prepares to become a pilot program for Marcus's bias training protocols, with federal funding and oversight ensuring that officers learn to recognize and counter implicit bias, especially regarding military families and communities of color. Marcus's daughter Zoe witnesses her father treated with the respect and dignity he has always deserved, learning that intelligence, patience, and moral authority ultimately triumph over prejudice and abuse of power. The story breaks nationally within hours of Marcus's release, becoming a rallying cry for military families, civil rights advocates, and anyone who has experienced institutional bias or police misconduct. Veteran arrested at daughter's school play trends across social media platforms and cable news networks, with Marcus's strategic decision to document everything, providing irrefutable evidence of systemic prejudice in action. The footage recorded by parents at the school, combined with the audio recordings from his military equipment, creates a comprehensive record that no amount of police spin or damage control can dispute or minimize. Federal civil rights attorneys from prestigious law firms offer to represent Marcus pro bono in what they recognize as a landmark case with national implications, but he strategically declines financial litigation in favor of systematic reform and institutional change. His approach shifts the entire focus from personal compensation to preventive education, demonstrating the kind of leadership that prioritizes community benefit over individual gain. This decision amplifies his moral authority and makes his eventual testimony more powerful than any monetary settlement could achieve. Internal Affairs launches a comprehensive review of Hawkins' entire career, uncovering a documented pattern of excessive force, biased complaints, and falsified reports spanning more than a decade of misconduct. Previous victims, emboldened by Marcus's courage and the federal attention his case has generated, come forward with their own stories of abuse, harassment, and civil rights violations. The investigation reveals that department leadership consistently protected Hawkins through union intervention and administrative cover-ups, making the institution complicit in his misconduct. Hawkins faces immediate suspension without pay, federal civil rights charges, loss of pension benefits, and criminal prosecution for falsifying police reports and violating constitutional rights under color of law. His refusal to admit error, show remorse, or cooperate with investigations makes him a liability that the department and the police union cannot afford to protect. His case becomes a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked bias and the federal government's commitment to protecting military families from discrimination. Political responses divide along predictable lines, with local politicians attempting to distance themselves from the incident, while federal representatives praise Marcus's restraint, professionalism, and commitment to systematic change over personal revenge. Military families from across the nation share similar experiences through veteran advocacy groups, revealing widespread patterns of discrimination that transform Marcus's individual case into a national conversation about respect for military service and equal treatment under law. The Riverside incident catalyzes statewide police training reforms, with Marcus's bias recognition protocols being adopted by multiple departments seeking to prevent similar federal interventions in their jurisdictions. His methods prove more effective than traditional sensitivity training because they focus on practical behavioral changes rather than abstract concepts, providing officers with specific tools for recognizing and countering their own unconscious prejudices in real-world situations. Marcus returns to Zoe's school for a rescheduled performance, this time treated as a hero by the same community that initially allowed his humiliation through silence and indifference. His daughter's pride in her father's dignity and strength becomes a teaching moment for other children, demonstrating that moral courage and intelligent resistance achieve better results than violence or hatred. The school implements new protocols for working with military families and addressing bias incidents. Pentagon officials commend Marcus's handling of the situation, recognizing that his ability to transform personal attack into professional victory demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership that military families need when facing civilian discrimination. His promotion and expanded responsibilities reflect the military's commitment to protecting its personnel and their families from the kind of treatment he endured. His research receives increased funding and expanded scope based on the real-world validation his arrest provided. Economic consequences for the department include increased insurance liability, federal oversight costs, mandatory training expenses, and potential civil settlements that strain the city budget for years to come. Chief Morrison realizes that bias isn't simply morally wrong, it's financially devastating for communities that fail to address it proactively. The cost of Marcus's training programs becomes insignificant compared to the expense of federal intervention and litigation. Marcus's calm strength in the face of injustice becomes a model for military families facing civilian discrimination throughout the country. His methods, strategic documentation, legal knowledge, moral authority, and systematic thinking, prove more effective than anger, violence, or emotional responses in achieving lasting change. Veterans organizations incorporate his techniques into their advocacy training, preparing military families to protect themselves from bias while maintaining their dignity and legal standing. Federal integration improves as the incident leads to enhanced cooperation protocols between military and civilian law enforcement agencies. Military personnel receive better protection from civilian bias, while law enforcement agencies get improved training on military culture, legal requirements, and the procedures necessary for working with classified personnel. The mutual understanding prevents future incidents while building bridges between communities that should be natural allies. Derek Hawkins faces federal civil rights charges in a packed federal courtroom, where his defense attorneys attempt to portray him as a dedicated officer making split-second decisions under difficult circumstances. But the overwhelming evidence makes their task impossible. Marcus's military-grade recordings play for the jury, capturing every biased assumption, unprofessional comment, and deliberate humiliation tactic in crystal-clear audio that strips away any possibility of denial or rationalization. The prosecution presents a methodical case demonstrating that Hawkins' actions weren't mistakes or misunderstandings, but deliberate violations of constitutional rights, driven by racial prejudice and abuse of authority. The pattern of Hawkins' misconduct emerges through testimony from federal investigators who uncovered 23 complaints of excessive force over his 12-year career, with 18 involving minorities and 12 specifically targeting veterans or military families. His personnel file reveals a disturbing progression of bias incidents, anger management issues, and civilian complaints that were consistently ignored or minimized by department leadership. Expert witnesses explain how his behavior fits established patterns of officers who use their authority to terrorize communities rather than protect them. Previous victims testify to Hawkins' documented history of targeting military families, describing traffic stops that became harassment sessions, home visits that turned into intimidation campaigns, and routine interactions that escalated into constitutional violations. Military spouses describe being treated as potential threats rather than family members of service personnel, while veterans recount being criminalized for displaying the confidence and bearing that military service instilled in them. Their collective testimony paints a picture of systematic abuse enabled by institutional indifference. Marcus's testimony becomes the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, delivered with the same calm authority that frustrated Hawkins during the arrest. He doesn't seek personal revenge or emotional satisfaction, but instead explains how Hawkins' actions represent broader failures in training, accountability, and cultural awareness that affect military families nationwide. His clinical analysis of each constitutional violation, combined with his strategic documentation of the psychological tactics employed against him, provides the jury with irrefutable evidence of deliberate misconduct. Under cross-examination, Hawkins' true character emerges as his racism becomes undeniable, his unprofessionalism inexcusable, and his complete lack of remorse shocking even to observers prepared for the worst. His testimony reveals someone so committed to his prejudiced worldview that he cannot acknowledge wrongdoing, even when facing federal prosecution. The jury observes a man whose hatred has consumed his judgment and whose authority corrupted his humanity, making him a danger to every community he was sworn to protect. Professional consequences for Hawkins include immediate termination, loss of pension benefits, and federal prison time for civil rights violations under color of law. His conviction establishes legal precedent for protecting military families from civilian law enforcement bias, sending a clear message throughout the country that federal authority will protect those who serve our nation. His case becomes required study in police academies and law schools, demonstrating the career-ending consequences of unchecked prejudice in law enforcement. Community response in Riverside reflects the deep shame of residents who initially supported Hawkins or remained silent during Marcus's humiliation. As his true character becomes public through court proceedings, the community realizes they enabled discrimination through complacency and willful ignorance. His conviction provides them with an opportunity for redemption through support for Marcus's reform programs and commitment to preventing similar incidents in their community. Systemic accountability extends beyond Hawkins to other officers who remained silent during Marcus's abuse, with several facing disciplinary action for failing to intervene or report misconduct. The blue wall of silence that traditionally protects corrupt officers cracks when federal authorities make clear that protecting biased colleagues endangers everyone's career and freedom. The cultural change forces officers to choose between loyalty to prejudiced colleagues and commitment to constitutional policing. Marcus's bias training protocols become the federal standard for all law enforcement agencies receiving federal funding, transforming his research from academic study to practical reform affecting thousands of departments nationwide. The Department of Justice mandates implementation of his methods as a condition of federal grants, ensuring that his experience creates lasting change in police training and accountability procedures. His curriculum focuses on recognizing unconscious bias, understanding military culture, and maintaining professional courtesy regardless of a citizen's background or appearance. Police academies throughout the country integrate Marcus's modules into their basic training programs, teaching new officers that military bearing and confidence aren't threats to police authority, but assets to community safety. His approach emphasizes that veterans and military families deserve special respect rather than suspicion, and that officers who cannot distinguish between confidence and defiance lack the emotional intelligence necessary for professional law enforcement. Training videos featuring his arrest become powerful teaching tools, demonstrating how bias escalates routine encounters into federal incidents. Cultural bridge-building programs connect military families with local law enforcement through community events, ride-alongs, and educational exchanges that foster mutual understanding and respect. Marcus creates initiatives where veterans share their experiences with police officers, while law enforcement personnel learn about military culture, service stress, and the unique challenges facing military families. These programs transform potential adversaries into allies working together for community safety and mutual protection. Legislative impact occurs when Congress passes the Military Family Protection Act, establishing clear protocols for law enforcement interaction with service members and their families based directly on Marcus's recommendations and research findings. The legislation requires immediate verification of military status, mandates bias training for federally funded departments, and creates oversight mechanisms ensuring that military personnel receive appropriate treatment from civilian authorities. Marcus's experience provides the foundation for comprehensive reform protecting military families nationwide. Technology integration spreads as the recording equipment Marcus used becomes standard issue for documenting police interactions, protecting both citizens and officers from false accusations and misconduct allegations. Body cameras, audio recording devices, and GPS tracking create comprehensive documentation that prevents the kind of he said, she said disputes that traditionally favor police testimony over civilian complaints. Transparency becomes the foundation of accountability in police-community relations. Professional development opportunities expand as Marcus becomes a sought-held consultant helping departments nationwide develop bias-free policing strategies that emphasize dignity, respect, and constitutional compliance for all citizens, regardless of race, military status, or social position. His approach proves that effective law enforcement and civil rights protection aren't competing goals, but complementary aspects of professional policing that builds community trust rather than fear. Community transformation in Riverside demonstrates how individual incidents can catalyze broader social change when handled with intelligence and strategic thinking rather than anger and revenge. The department that once humiliated Marcus now serves as a model for police-community relations, training other agencies in respectful professional law enforcement that protects constitutional rights while maintaining public safety. Their partnership proves that accountability and forgiveness can coexist when change is genuine and comprehensive. Educational impact spreads as Marcus's story becomes required study in criminal justice programs, demonstrating how individual bias can escalate into federal incidents with career-ending consequences for officers and financial devastation for communities. Students learn that professional law enforcement requires emotional intelligence, cultural awareness, and constitutional knowledge that transcends personal prejudices and local customs. 5 years after the incident that changed his life and countless others, Marcus stands in the same Riverside Elementary School auditorium where his nightmare began. But this time he's present as the guest speaker for Zoe's middle school graduation ceremony. The principal, who once watched his arrest in stunned silence, now introduces him with genuine pride and respect, describing his contributions to police reform and military-civilian relations. The transformation in community attitudes reflects the broader changes his experience catalyzed throughout American law enforcement and military family advocacy. Zoe, now 13 years old and preparing for high school, introduces her father to the graduating class with undimmed pride and confidence that his dignified response to injustice taught her about character, resilience, and the power of strategic thinking over emotional reaction. She speaks about learning that intelligence and moral authority ultimately triumph over prejudice and abuse of power, lessons that have shaped her academic excellence and her commitment to social justice. Her classmates see Marcus as a hero who fought injustice with wisdom rather than violence, demonstrating that there are better ways to combat bias than anger and retaliation. The same parents who filmed his arrest and initially remained silent now applaud his achievements with genuine enthusiasm and gratitude for the positive changes his ordeal brought to their community. Riverside has become a more aware, more just, and more protective place, for all families, regardless of race, military status, or social position. The town that once allowed discrimination through indifference now actively promotes equality through education, community engagement, and zero tolerance for bias in any form. Marcus's training programs now operate in all 50 states, with police departments competing to hire officers trained in his bias recognition and cultural competency methods. Statistics demonstrate that incidents involving military families have decreased by 85% nationally, while community trust in law enforcement has improved significantly in departments implementing his protocols. His research has expanded beyond military families to include bias affecting all minority communities, creating comprehensive reform that protects constitutional rights while maintaining effective law enforcement. Chief Morrison, who kept his position through genuine commitment to reform and accountability, now works regularly with Marcus as a partner in police training and community relations. Their professional relationship proves that accountability and forgiveness can coexist when change is real, comprehensive, and sustained over time. Morrison's willingness to acknowledge his department's failures and implement meaningful reform saved his career and his community's trust in local law enforcement. Derek Hawkins serves his federal sentence as a cautionary tale for officers who believe that badge and uniform grant immunity from consequences for constitutional violations and civil rights abuse. His downfall protects countless future victims from similar treatment, while demonstrating that federal authority will intervene when local systems fail to protect military families and minority communities. His case becomes a permanent reminder that prejudice has consequences that extend far beyond individual careers. Marcus reflects on how his arrest, traumatic as it was for his family, provided the perfect laboratory for testing his theories about institutional bias and developing practical solutions for systematic reform. Sometimes providence uses individual injustice to create broader justice, transforming personal trauma into professional triumph that benefits entire communities. His ability to see beyond his own suffering to the larger systemic problems his experience could help solve demonstrates the kind of leadership that creates lasting change. Sarah and Zoe never questioned Marcus's handling of the crisis, their faith in his wisdom and character sustaining him through the darkest moments of doubt and anger that threatened to derail his strategic approach. Family love proved stronger than social hatred, providing the foundation of strength necessary for maintaining dignity under extreme pressure. Their support enabled him to focus on systematic solutions rather than personal revenge, multiplying the positive impact of his experience. The moral lesson Marcus learned and now teaches is that true power isn't the ability to dominate or destroy others, but the capacity to transform systems, change hearts, and create lasting justice that protects future generations from similar suffering. His restraint and strategic thinking accomplished more than violence ever could, proving that intelligence and moral authority ultimately triumph over prejudice and abuse when applied with patience and wisdom. The man who entered that police station as a victim emerged as a catalyst for nationwide change, demonstrating that individual courage can create systematic transformation. Marcus Washington's story proves that individual courage, strategic thinking, and moral authority can create systematic change that protects entire communities from the kind of injustice he experienced at Riverside Police Station. When you face discrimination, bias, or abuse of authority, remember that documentation, intelligent resistance, and commitment to legal processes often accomplish more than anger, violence, or emotional reactions. His methods: remaining calm under pressure, gathering evidence systematically, maintaining moral superiority, and working toward institutional reform rather than personal revenge, provide a blueprint for transforming individual trauma into community benefit. Have you ever witnessed injustice like this in your own community? The next time you see someone facing unfair treatment because of their race, military status, or social position, consider how you can support them while documenting the situation for potential legal action or systematic reform. Marcus's experience demonstrates that bystanders have power to create change through witnessing, recording, and refusing to remain silent when constitutional rights are violated in their presence. Share this story with friends, family members, and community leaders to promote discussion about how implicit bias affects law enforcement, military families, and minority communities in your area. Support organizations working to improve police-community relations, protect military families from discrimination, and ensure that all citizens receive equal treatment under law regardless of their background or appearance. Change begins with awareness, but it requires sustained action and community commitment to create lasting improvement. Consider how you can apply Marcus's strategic methods in your own life when facing unfair treatment or institutional bias. Document incidents carefully, maintain your dignity and legal standing, seek systematic solutions rather than personal revenge, and work toward changes that benefit entire communities rather than just individual cases. His approach of transforming attackers into allies through education and reform creates more lasting change than destructive confrontation or legal warfare. If you work in law enforcement, education, community service, or any profession involving public trust, examine how Marcus's bias recognition protocols might improve your professional practice and better serve diverse communities. Excellence requires constant learning, growth, and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional prejudices that affect your work. His training programs are available to help professionals develop cultural competency and constitutional awareness necessary for serving all citizens equally. Marcus's transformation of Riverside demonstrates that communities can change when confronted with evidence of their failures and provided with practical solutions for improvement. How can you help your community become more just, more protective of military families, and more committed to equal treatment for all residents, regardless of race or background? Change requires individual action, but it achieves lasting impact through collective commitment and systematic reform. The work of justice never ends as new challenges emerge and different communities face varying forms of discrimination and bias. Marcus continues his mission nationwide, but similar problems exist in every community where prejudice meets authority and creates opportunities for abuse. What biases still need addressing in your area? What communities still need protection? How can you contribute to the ongoing work of creating equal justice under law? Marcus chose transformation over revenge, systematic change over personal vindication, and community benefit over individual satisfaction. When you face injustice in your own life, will you choose the path that creates lasting change for future generations, or will you settle for temporary satisfaction that doesn't prevent others from suffering similar treatment? His example challenges all of us to think beyond our immediate circumstances to the broader impact our responses can achieve. Should there be mandatory federal standards for police training regarding military families and minority communities? What additional protections do veterans and their families need from civilian law enforcement bias? Your voice matters in shaping policies that affect military families throughout America, and Marcus's story provides powerful evidence for the changes our communities need to protect those who serve our nation. Remember Marcus Washington's lesson: true strength isn't conquering your enemies, it's transforming them into allies for justice. When faced with prejudice and abuse of power, choose intelligence over anger, strategy over emotion, and systematic reform over personal revenge. The path of wisdom creates lasting change that protects future generations from the injustices we face today.